What if I told you that everything you've been made to feel ashamed about, your intensity, your sensitivity, your refusal to accept surface-level bullshit, are actually signs that you're part of America's psychological elite? Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist who revolutionized how we understand the human mind, identified 8 unmistakable signs of what he called differentiated consciousness. And if you recognize even 4 of these traits, you're among the rare 5% of Americans who operate at an advanced level of psychological sophistication. Here's the kicker. Our society has been gaslighting you your entire life. They've told you you're too much, too complicated, too sensitive. But Jung discovered something that will blow your mind. These aren't character flaws. They're evolutionary upgrades. You're not broken. You're breakthrough. You're not the problem. You're the solution to humanity's next level of consciousness. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal Jung's 8 definitive signs of psychological rarity, and I guarantee that by the end of this video, you'll understand why you've always felt like you don't quite fit in. Spoiler alert, it's because you're operating on a frequency that most people can't even access. Are you ready to discover just how extraordinary you really are? The supernatural emotional depth. Let's start with the first sign that separates you from the psychological masses. You experience emotions like you're plugged into the universe's mainframe. While most Americans are scrolling through life on emotional airplane mode, you're receiving every signal, every frequency, every subtle vibration of human experience. Jung called this affectome complexes, but let me break it down in terms that'll hit different. You don't just have feelings. Feelings move through you like symphonies. Each emotion carries layers of meaning that would make other people's heads spin. When someone walks into a room carrying invisible baggage, you feel it in your bones before they even speak. When there's tension crackling in the air that everyone else seems to ignore, you're absorbing it like a lightning rod. Here's what blew Jung's mind about people like you. This isn't emotional instability. It's emotional sophistication operating at genius level. Think about it this way. If emotions were a language, most people are speaking at a kindergarten level, using basic words like good and bad. But you're speaking graduate-level emotional poetry, accessing what Jung called the objective psyche layers of human experience that most people have learned to numb out. This is why small talk feels like torture to you. It's why you can't pretend everything's fine when you can literally feel the undercurrents of pain, joy, fear, and longing swirling around every social interaction. Your nervous system isn't overreacting, it's overachieving. You're processing emotional data that others can't even detect. But here's where it gets wild. Jung discovered that this supernatural emotional depth isn't just a personal experience, it's a service to humanity. When you feel deeply, you're doing the emotional labor that keeps our species connected to its heart. You're the early warning system for collective emotional weather patterns. You're sensing what's coming before it hits the mainstream consciousness. Dr. Elaine Aron's research on highly sensitive people backs this up with hard science. About 20% of Americans have nervous systems that process sensory information more deeply. But Jung identified something even rarer. People whose entire emotional architecture operates at an advanced frequency. That's you. The tragedy is that our emotionally illiterate culture has taught you to see this gift as a burden. You've been told to toughen up, stop being so sensitive, or don't take everything so personally. But Jung understood something revolutionary. You're not taking things personally, you're taking them universally. You're feeling the human condition in high definition, while others are stuck with dial-up emotional internet. This is why you've probably felt like you're too much for most people. Newsflash, you're not too much there, too little. You're operating with emotional bandwidth that most people don't even know exists. It's like having 4K vision in a world full of people squinting through foggy glasses. Jung wrote that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But for you, everything illuminates pathways to understanding that others can't even see. You're not just living your emotions, you're decoding the emotional matrix of human existence. Here's what I want you to understand. Your emotional depth isn't a bug in your programming, it's the feature that makes you revolutionary. In a country that's drowning in emotional numbness, antidepressants, and artificial connections, you're walking around with natural access to the full spectrum of human feeling. You're emotionally bilingual in a world of people who can barely speak their own emotional language. The key isn't to dial down your intensity, it's to learn how to channel it consciously. Jung discovered that when people with supernatural, emotional depth learn to honor their gift, instead of hiding from it, they become emotional alchemists. They transform not just their own experience, but everyone around them. So if you've ever been told you feel too much, here's your new response. I feel exactly as much as the situation requires. Because in a world that's forgotten how to feel authentically, your emotional depth isn't a liability, it's leadership. The sacred curiosity that threatens comfortable lies. Asterisk, the second sign you're psychologically elite. You possess what Jung called the transcendent function, but I call it sacred curiosity. While most Americans are perfectly content living what Jung termed unconscious lives, accepting social programming without question, you can't help but dig deeper. You're the person who ruins dinner parties by asking why we pretend our economic system serves human flourishing when it clearly doesn't. Jung would have recognized you immediately as someone with an active thinking function that refuses to accept surface explanations. You don't just ask what, you ask why, with the persistence of a philosophical bloodhound. Why do people stay in relationships that slowly kill their souls? Why do we accept a healthcare system that profits from keeping us sick? Why do we call it the American dream when most people are sleepwalking through nightmares? Here's what makes your curiosity sacred. It's not driven by intellectual ego. It's driven by an authentic desire to understand reality at levels that actually matter. You're not trying to sound smart, you're trying to live smart. You're not questioning things to be difficult. You're questioning things because accepting lies feels like psychological poison to your system. Jung called this the ability to see beyond current limitations while others remain trapped in what psychologists now call consensus reality, the shared delusion that things are the way they are, because that's the way they have to be. But you're already 3 steps ahead, envisioning what could be different, what could be more authentic, what could honor the full spectrum of human potential instead of just the profitable parts. The brutal truth is that your questions threaten other people's comfortable illusions. When you ask why we accept systems that don't serve us, you're challenging the psychological defenses that keep people feeling safe in their limitations. When you wonder out loud why we settle for shallow connections, you're holding up a mirror that shows others how superficial their relationships really are. This is why you've probably been told you think too much or make things too complicated. Translation: your curiosity makes them uncomfortable with their own lack of curiosity. Your questions force them to confront possibilities they've been avoiding. Your refusal to accept easy answers highlights how easily they've accepted nan-answers. Jung discovered something fascinating about people with sacred curiosity. They often feel isolated not because they're antisocial, but because they're pre-social. You're operating at a level of psychological development that most people haven't reached yet. It's like being fluent in a language that most people are still learning to pronounce. Here's where it gets really interesting. Your compulsive questioning isn't random, it's systematic. You're unconsciously mapping the gaps between what we say we value and what we actually prioritize. You're identifying the places where collective consciousness is still operating from fear, habit, and limitation instead of wisdom, creativity, and possibility. But Jung warned about something crucial. People with sacred curiosity often exhaust themselves trying to wake up others who aren't ready to be awakened. You become the unofficial therapist for your friend group, the one everyone comes to with their problems, but who somehow never gets the same level of curiosity directed toward. Understanding your complexity. The key is learning what Jung called psychological discrimination, the ability to discern who is genuinely curious about deeper truth and who just wants to use your insights to feel better about not changing anything. Your sacred curiosity is a gift, but it's not an unlimited resource. You have to learn to share it strategically. Jung believed that people with transcendent function serve as evolutionary scouts for human consciousness. While others are content with the map they were handed, you're out there exploring territories that aren't on any map yet. You're asking the questions that will eventually become the answers that transform how we live, love, and organize society. Your curiosity isn't too much. It's exactly what America needs to evolve beyond its current limitations. In a culture built on accepting what you're told, instead of questioning what serves you, your sacred curiosity isn't a character flaw, it's a character upgrade that the world desperately needs. The conscious independence that society fears. The third sign you're psychologically rare hits different. You've developed what Jung called individuated consciousness, but what I call conscious independence. This isn't the fake independence. of rugged individualism that America loves to romanticize. This is something far more profound and threatening to the status quo. You've learned to source your sense of worth from within, instead of depending on external validation to feel valuable. Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And you've done exactly that, not by choice, but by psychological necessity. Here's what most people don't understand. Your independence isn't a defensive mechanism you developed because you got hurt. It's an achievement. It's evidence that you've completed psychological work that most Americans spend their entire lives avoiding. You've learned through hard-earned experience that depending on others for your sense of identity is psychological quicksand. So you built yourself from the ground up. You stood up, often alone, and created an unshakable sense of self that couldn't be destroyed by someone else's opinion, absence, or approval. Jung called this process individuation, the psychological journey toward becoming whole. And most people never complete it because it requires facing what he termed the shadow. Here's what's wild. While other Americans are desperately seeking external validation through social media likes, career success, relationship status, or material possessions, you've already discovered that none of that stuff can fill the void. That can only be filled by acceptance. Your solitude isn't loneliness, it's sanctuary. It's where you remember who you are beneath all the roles and expectations that society tries to force on you. But this conscious independence comes with a price that Jung understood intimately. When you stop needing others to validate your worth. Some people interpret that as rejection. When you stop seeking approval, people who are addicted to giving and receiving approval feel threatened. When you're comfortable being alone, people who are terrified of their own company assume you're antisocial. The truth is more complex. You've learned to distinguish between connection and codependence. You can love people without needing them to complete you. You can enjoy relationships without requiring them to define you. You can be supportive without sacrificing your boundaries. This level of emotional maturity is rare in a culture that confuses need with love and dependence with devotion. Jung discovered something beautiful about people who achieve conscious independence. They become magnets for authentic relationships, precisely because they're not desperately seeking them. When you're not trying to use other people to fill your emotional holes, you can actually see them clearly. When you're not performing for approval, you can show up authentically. When you're not afraid of being alone, you can choose companionship from a place of strength rather than weakness. But here's where it gets psychologically fascinating. Your independence often triggers other people's abandonment wounds. They see your self-sufficiency and interpret it as evidence that you don't need them, which activates their deepest fears about not being valuable. Your ability to be okay without constant reassurance threatens their addiction to reassurance seeking. This is why you've probably been called cold, distant, or hard to get close to by people who mistake emotional neediness for intimacy. But Jung understood that true intimacy is only possible between two people who have already learned to be complete within themselves. Everything else is just two incomplete people trying to use each other to feel whole. Your conscious independence isn't selfishness, it's self-responsibility. You've taken ownership of your emotional well-being instead of making it other people's job to manage your feelings. You've learned to meet your own needs instead of expecting others to guess what you need and then resenting them when they guess wrong. Jung believed that individuated consciousness is the foundation of psychological health, but it's also the foundation of social evolution. When you stop looking to others to tell you who you are, you give them permission to stop performing for your approval. To your independence create space for everyone around you to discover their own authenticity in a culture that profits from keeping people dependent on external validation. Your conscious independence isn't just personal liberation, it's revolutionary. You're modeling what it looks like to be psychologically sovereign in a world full of people who've outsourced their self-worth to others. The hyper-perceptive awareness that sees through everything. The fourth sign, you're part of the psychological elite, will make you feel seen in a way that's almost unsettling. You possess hyper-perceptive awareness that operates like a psychological X-ray machine. Jung revolutionized psychology when he identified intuition as a legitimate psychological function. But what you have goes beyond intuition. You read people's psychological signatures like you're fluent in a language they don't even know they're speaking. You don't just observe people, you see through their masks. Behind their performances, beneath their carefully constructed personas. Jung would have recognized this as evidence of what he called active imagination. the ability to perceive beyond the obvious surface reality into the unconscious patterns that actually drive behavior. When someone says they're fine but their entire energetic field is screaming distress, you can't unsee it. When there's tension crackling in a room that everyone else seems oblivious to, you feel it in your nervous system like an alarm going off. Here's what Jung understood that most therapists still miss. This isn't paranoia or overthinking. It's psychological sensitivity operating at a level that most people never develop. You notice micro-expressions that flash across someone's face for a split second. You pick up on vocal tonalities that reveal what they're really feeling underneath what they're saying. You sense the energy shifts when someone's mood changes, before they're even consciously aware it's happening. But this hyperperceptive awareness comes with a burden that Jung warned about extensively. You end up becoming an unconscious therapist for everyone around you. You automatically start regulating conversations to avoid triggering people's emotional landmines. You carry pain that isn't yours to carry. You solve problems that others don't even realize they have. The wild part is that most Americans are walking around completely unconscious of the emotional information they're broadcasting 24/7. They think they're hiding their insecurity, their anger, their desperation, their fear. But to you, it's like they're wearing neon signs. You can see their defense mechanisms, their coping strategies, their unconscious patterns with startling clarity. This is why small talk feels like psychological torture to you. While others are exchanging pleasantries about the weather, you're simultaneously processing their attachment style, their unresolved trauma, their self-esteem issues, and their relationship dynamics. It's like having a conversation on multiple levels simultaneously, the surface level that everyone else is participating in, and the deeper psychological level that you can't ignore. Jung discovered something crucial about people with hyper-awareness. They often struggle with boundaries because they can see everyone's emotional needs so clearly that they feel compelled to meet them. You become the person everyone comes to for advice, support, and understanding, but you rarely receive the same level of attunement in return. Here's what's fascinating from a neurological perspective. Your brain has developed enhanced pattern recognition, specifically for human psychological states. While most people's brains filter out irrelevant emotional information to avoid overwhelm, your brain processes it all. You're receiving and analyzing emotional data that others' nervous systems automatically discard. This hyperperceptive awareness often makes you feel like you're living in a different reality from everyone else. You see the dysfunction in systems that others accept as normal. You recognize the emotional undercurrents in families that everyone pretends don't exist. You perceive the incongruence between people's stated values and their actual behavior. But Jung identified something beautiful about this gift when it's used consciously. People with hyperperceptive awareness become natural healers and catalysts for growth. When someone feels truly seen by you, not judged, but genuinely understood, it creates a space for them to heal parts of themselves they've been hiding from everyone else, including themselves. The key is learning what Jung called psychological discrimination, the ability to perceive clearly without taking responsibility for everything you perceive. Your hyperperceptive awareness is a gift, but it's not a burden you have to carry for everyone else. In a culture that's largely emotionally illiterate, your ability to read psychological signatures isn't a curse, it's exactly what we need to evolve beyond surface-level connections into authentic human relationship. You're not seeing too much, everyone else is seeing too little. The undefined purpose that's bigger than you. The final sign that confirms you're psychologically rare is the most profound. You sense a purpose that can't be defined yet, but feels absolutely undeniable. Jung called this the transcendent function driving you toward individuation. But what you're experiencing is something that goes beyond personal fulfillment. You feel a restless knowing that you have something to contribute, something to build, something to express that's bigger than just living a comfortable life. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. This isn't about fame, recognition, or traditional success. This is about alignment, the psychological necessity of living in harmony with your deepest nature. That persistent feeling that you're meant for something more isn't grandiose delusion, it's your psyche, recognizing its own potential and demanding that you live up to it. Jung found that people who ignore this calling develop neurotic symptoms, anxiety, depression, a gnawing sense of meaninglessness that can't be fixed by external achievements. Your purpose-driven nature isn't asking you to become someone different. It's asking you to become who you actually are at the deepest level, stripped of all the conditioning and expectations that have been layered on top of your authentic self. But here's Jung's most mind-blowing insight about purpose-driven personalities. Your calling isn't just personal, it's transpersonal. You're not just here to fulfill yourself. You're here to serve the evolution of consciousness itself. This is why traditional goals feel empty to you. Making money, climbing corporate ladders, accumulating possessions, none of it satisfies the deeper drive, because your purpose is connected to something larger than individual achievement. Think about it this way. Every major evolutionary leap in human consciousness has been driven by individuals who couldn't accept the status quo. The people who expanded our understanding of science, art, psychology, social justice, and human potential were all driven by this same undefined but undeniable sense of purpose. They weren't trying to be different, they were trying to be authentic, and their authenticity happened to be exactly what humanity needed to grow. This is why you've probably felt like you're always preparing for something without knowing what it is. You're constantly learning, growing, developing skills and insights that don't seem to fit into any conventional career path. You're being prepared for work that doesn't fully exist yet, work that you may have to create yourself. Jung discovered something beautiful about people with transpersonal purpose. They become bridges between what is and what could be. Through your refusal to settle for ordinary, you're expanding what's possible for human experience. Through your commitment to authenticity, you're giving others permission to be real too. Through your willingness to live your questions, you're pioneering answers that others will eventually follow. But Jung also identified the stages of purpose development, and understanding where you are in this process is crucial. First comes the unconscious phase, where you feel the calling but try to fit it into conventional frameworks. Then comes the awakening phase, where you start to recognize that your purpose might not look like everyone else's. Finally comes the integration phase, where you stop apologizing for being different and start owning your role as an evolutionary catalyst. The loneliness you feel isn't because you're antisocial, it's because you're pre-social. You're scouting territory that most people haven't explored yet. You're solving problems that most people don't even recognize as problems. You're creating possibilities that most people don't believe are possible. Here's what I want you to understand. Your undefined purpose isn't confusion, it's potential seeking expression. Jung believed that the individuals who feel this calling most strongly are the ones who will push humanity toward its next level of consciousness. Your restlessness isn't a problem to be solved, it's energy to be channeled toward creating the world you know is possible. The goal isn't to figure out your purpose intellectually, it's to live it. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, depth over surface, meaning over convenience, you're fulfilling your transpersonal purpose. You're not just living your life, you're expanding what it means to be human. Your undefined purpose is the universe's way of saying, the world needs what you have to offer. Even if neither of you fully understand